Hey, and welcome back to another video in my Vintage Tech Showcase playlist, the playlist of videos where I showcase older electronic devices and iPods as well in a form of retro style review. And today we have the Pantech Breakout from 2011. Now, I've said earlier that this series is not only for special phones like the Nokia 7280, the 5700 Express Music, basically special phones. This series is not only for unique or special or rare phones. I also do run-of-the-mill phones such as this. Now, the Pantech Breakout was a phone that probably a lot of people had back in 2011. It was your run-of-the-mill Verizon smartphone priced at $999. So it was towards the budget side of things. And it's a phone that probably a majority of the Verizon user base owned because of its price range, and they probably used it as their main phone or as a secondary phone because it was cheaper. So I also cover phones that aren't too special and are run-of-the-mill. I also said the same thing in my LG Lucid video, which you can find up there. But before we jump right into this video, don't forget to smash that like button as always and hit that subscribe button if you already haven't. And also hit that bell notification button to get notified whenever I upload a new video. I'm on Instagram, Discord, and Twitter, and you can follow me on those using the links down in the description below. Alrighty, let's jump right into this video. And also, I'd like to point out that I got this phone in a part slot, which you can find up here, the part slot video. I got each phone for like, I don't know, $3 or $4, which was kind of a steal. And there was a bunch of other phones in that part slot as well, so you can go check that out. This one was one of the working ones out of the box when I got it. There were some phones that were broken as well. This one was the one of the working ones, so you can go check that video out as well. Okay, so starting off with a bit of history, the Pantech Breakout was announced around July of 2011 and launched in September of 2011. And like I said, is a run-of-the-mill Android smartphone in the budget range. You could get it for $999 on Verizon's network back in the day. And this phone does have a SIM card slot, so it was not one of the SIM card-less phones. So you could indeed put a SIM card into this thing. Let's have a quick go around of the phone first. As you can see, it is not a minimalistic looking phone. It's a very industrial, futuristic looking kind of thing, and it kind of goes with the theme that is running with the apps and stuff. And we'll talk about the apps and stuff in the software section of this video, but let's lock the let's lock the display for now and have a closer look at the body of the phone. So up front here we have our single VGA camera over there, the speaker grill, Verizon branding over there. There's a screen protector on this particular unit, so those scratches are on the screen protector. Pantech branding down here, multi menu button that varies depending on which app you're in. So if you're in camera, you can get the camera settings up. If you're in the browser, you can get the browser settings up. A really handy button that you no longer get in modern smartphones. Home button, back button, search button down there. The home, this entire thing is made out of metal, so that's good. On this side of the phone, this flap-like thing is missing, as you can see there. That's where the micro USB port is. Power button / lock button, camera button. This camera button is I try to get it to autofocus, but there's no half setting, like you half press and then you full press. No, that's not there. You full press only, and it autofocuses by itself and then takes the photo as well. So it's not an ideal button, but it gets the job done. On the topic of buttons, this phone has a lot of them. As you can see, it has a assistant button down there as well. So it's not Google Assistant, but it's this phone's inbuilt assistant. There was no such thing as Google Assistant back in the day, and Siri was in its infancy as well. Volume rocker and sideward facing headphone jack there, so something you don't really see much even on modern phones. Nothing at the top, and at the bottom we have nothing as well, and there's a microphone hidden down over there. Finally, at the back we have Pantech branding, 4G LTE, Verizon, the speaker, the autofocus 5 megapixel camera, another microphone for video recording, no flash, and a textured back. It's a plastic texture. It's kind of towards the rougher side, but I personally don't like it too much, but I'm pretty sure some people liked it, and it's definitely good for a lot of grip. So that was a quick go around of the phone. Now let's start talking about the display and everything else. So we can now go on to the display of the Pantech Breakout, and at this price range you really can't expect too much from a display in 2011, and that's basically what you got with the Pantech Breakout. The display is a TFT, a LCD capacitive touchscreen, so TFT LCD technology. You won't get the entire 16 million color palette. Instead, you get 256,000 colors, which was perfectly fine for the time. But there were also displays that still gave you the full 16 million colors, such as the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 4S. But at this price range, this TFT LCD technology, 256,000 colors is what you got. But that is perfectly adequate, and you're not going to notice any major differences. The display is also a 4-inch touchscreen, as you can see here. Towards the medium side back in 2011, 4 inches was somewhere around the medium end of things, because there were slightly bigger displays and there were slightly smaller displays as well. So a 4-inch display, 480 by 800 pixels, which gives it a rough pixel density of around 233 pixels per inch and a 5:3 aspect ratio. The colors are not really saturated, which is kind of surprising for a budget smartphone from back in the day. They usually had very saturated displays. The colors aren't very saturated on this, but it is colorful and it gets the job done. I mean, for its time and its price, this is basically what you can expect. Again, a run-of-the-mill phone with a run-of-the-mill display. No wow factor here, but it's not horrible either. The outdoor performance is pretty decent. The brightness on this screen is actually quite good. If you keep increasing it, it actually has a good brightness, as you can see there. That's auto brightness, and now I almost turned off the entire brightness. Okay, so it does have a good brightness. It does work well in the bright sunlight, and it does an overall good job, and it would have been a perfectly usable display for 2011. And if you use this in 2021, I mean, it's not going to be great, but it's not going to be anything too horrible either. Anyway, that was the display on the Pantech Breakout. Now let's move on to software. Alright, now moving on to software on the Pantech Breakout. It initially shipped with Android 2.3 Gingerbread, and it was finally upgradable to Android 2.3.3 Gingerbread, as you can see there. Now this was common with these budget locked phones. The manufacturer, though they probably wanted to give the phone at least 1 or 2 more updates, these locked carriers like Verizon, AT&T and stuff, they had more control over the phone than the manufacturer, surprise, surprise. And they declined these updates because they wanted to push the newer models and make the older models obsolete. That has been changed as of 2021. Since I think 2016, 2017, people had complained saying that these things are not getting updates, they're getting obsolete. And with the new environmental friendly rules and stuff, of course, older devices should be kept working longer, so they're forced to give updates. But back in the day, these companies skipped out on updates a lot. Even though the manufacturers asked them if they wanted an update, the carriers, the Verizon, AT&T and stuff, they will still skimp out on the updates to push the newer model. Anyway, as you can see, this is Android Gingerbread, your old school Android Gingerbread with a lot of bloat apps. Obviously, it was a Verizon phone. There was a lot of bloat apps that came pre-installed. Most of these you can't really delete without rooting the phone. This is back in the day when the Google Play Store was known as Market or Marketplace. So this is way old school. You have your classic camera, your classic gallery, classic Gmail app, just good old school stuff. We have multitasking over here as well, and if you go into settings there, the multitasking actually works quite well on this phone, I must say. The interface is pretty fast, but that's only because I have not connected it to Wi-Fi. If I connect this thing to Wi-Fi, it's gonna freak out and it's gonna be unusable because it's old, and modern Wi-Fi kind of confuses these old things. So I'm not gonna connect it to Wi-Fi. This thing is from an era where widgets was like the thing, like everyone wanted to shove as many widgets as they can on their screen. This phone came with widgets like Pantech widgets, as you can see here. So a bunch of widgets from Pantech over there. And there's also your stock Android widgets, which you have there. You have a few Verizon widgets as well. And as you can see, I've put a few there. Well, actually I didn't put, I only put this one. Everything else was already here. This clock-like thing widget, the weather data, social net, whatever the hell that thing is. So there's a bunch of widgets on this phone. It was from an era where everyone was just trying to have more widgets as they can, customize your Android phone, make it yours. It was the glory days of the beginning of where Android really came into play and showed the user how customizable it was and like how you could make it yours. It wasn't as polished as iOS. Obviously, iOS was focusing more on a polished OS, simplicity and stuff like that. Android was more rugged and customizable, not even close to as polished as iOS, but for those who wanted to tweak their phones, Android was the thing, and that gap is kind of closing in 2021. But this is nice to see how Android this is basically one of the few beginnings of Android with all the widgets and stuff. But either way, that was the widgets and basically the overall software experience on the Pantech Breakout. Now let's move on to internal hardware. So looking under the hood, we can see that the Pantech Breakout is powered by a single core Qualcomm Snapdragon S2 clocked in at 1 GHz, and this is the MSM 8655 variant of the Qualcomm Snapdragon S2. It also has 512 megs of RAM and 1 gig of internal storage. However, you could use only 234 megs of that internal storage, as the rest probably went for the interface, the operating system, and everything else. However, you got an 8 gig card out of the box. However, I don't have that card anymore. I have put a 32 gig SanDisk SD card in there for the camera samples on this phone that I'll be showing you a bit earlier. And the phone can probably take up to around, I think 32 is around its max. There is no information online regarding what its max is, but 64 was kind of too much for the time, so I think I've put the limit that it can take, which is 32 gigs of memory, which is more than enough to power this phone. As you can see here, it works just fine, but obviously, like I said, if I connect it to Wi-Fi, it's going to start freaking out. But for its time, it was more than snappy and it did the job well. And since it didn't get too many updates, it stayed on its original OS, which was Android Gingerbread. It also kind of helped the processor keep up and not get kind of bogged down by newer updates and stuff, which obviously affect the processor. And it being a single core processor, that kind of probably held it back. And again, it was 2011 and dual core processors were slowly creeping up because obviously the iPhone 4S also had a dual core processor by then, and this being still single core was kind of lagging behind. The Motorola Atrix, the Galaxy S2, and all the other great phones of the time were having dual core processors. So this thing was kind of lagging behind, but for what it is, it does a good job, as you can see there, provided I don't connect it to Wi-Fi. But anyway, that was the internal specifications of the Pantech Breakout. So we can now go on to talk about the camera on the Pantech Breakout, which is a 5 megapixel autofocus camera without a flash. So that was one of the downsides to this phone. Even on some of the older reviews, if you read them, they were questioning why they didn't include a flash on this thing, because there were some cheaper phones than this that actually had flashes and identical cameras. So that was just some decision they made to not include a flash on this thing. So 5 megapixel autofocus camera. It can shoot video at 720p at 30 FPS as well, and we'll be putting samples to that in a bit. Moving over to the front, as you can see vaguely there, the camera is kind of blended into the display there, the front-facing camera, which is a simple VGA camera, and I'll be putting some samples from that as well. So we'll go on to putting some photo and video samples from the rear camera first, and then I'll follow them up with some selfies from the front camera, and then we'll put a video sample as well, shot at 720p at 30 FPS. So now let's go roll the camera samples. So as you saw with those camera and video samples, basically it's what you get for the price. With a phone like this from its era, they're not horrible, they're not amazing either, they just get the job done. Now, like I said, I didn't put nighttime photography on this thing, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be that great, especially without a flash helping it if you just actually want to get like a group photo or something like that. So without a flash, that's kind of a big bummer for nighttime photography. Either way, this does not perform well at night. This phone is not meant to be a camera performer. It's meant to be a budget Android phone that'll let you get an Android experience at a lower price. But overall, I wouldn't hate too much on this camera. It is what it is. Some photos were actually quite decent and quite usable, even in 2021, and for its time, I believe people were more than happy for what they paid for with the camera performance on this phone. Either way, now we can move on to all the additional features. Okay, now for a demo of the single mono speaker here at the back. It was, according to some reviews, one of the louder speakers back in the day. It didn't sound the greatest, obviously it's a mono speaker, but it was actually towards the louder side, and I can confirm that it is kind of quite loud. Let me increase the volume to max here, and since I didn't really have time to put my YouTube licensed music onto this, meaning the songs that I use in this video and basically in my intro and at the background, as you heard earlier, we can instead use the ringtones as a sample. So max volume and yeah, so definitely towards the louder side there. So pulling back the slide out back cover, as you can see here, you'll also see the SanDisk Ultra 32 gig memory card that I mentioned earlier, and the SIM card slot that I mentioned earlier as well. This phone is a Verizon phone, but it also has a SIM card slot, unlike a lot of phones from Verizon back in the day. So you will be also greeted with the 1500 milliamp hour removable battery. So back when removable batteries were a thing. It has a standby time with this battery of up to around 305 hours and a talk time of around 5 hours and 50 minutes, maybe even 6 hours. And a lot of reviews from the time said that this phone actually had such a good battery life that it kind of compensated for its camera performance there. The battery on this phone was actually one of the higher performers. The battery lasted well into 1.5 days on medium to heavy use. So what it kind of lacked in camera performance and stuff and updates, it kind of made up with the battery life. A lot of budget phones at that time actually had really good battery life. And even, well, I wouldn't say today. I recently reviewed the Nokia 2 Vitella, which is a kind of a spiritual successor to this kind of, well, I wouldn't say it's one of the, I wouldn't say it's the spiritual successor, but one of the spiritual successors, since it's actually a Verizon phone and it's really super budget. So yeah, and that phone didn't have the most amazing battery life ever, but this thing has a really good battery life. I didn't charge this phone for a really long time because I got this in a part slot, which I showed you earlier, and I basically charged this once and forgot about it for like 2 months, and the battery still holds a lot of charge. That's because maybe this phone wasn't used a lot, and maybe you may have noticed that apart from the missing cover, this phone isn't that badly damaged either. So I don't know, but either way, it had one of the better battery lives in the budget range of phones back in 2011. So if you were expecting some form of unusual, amazing feature that this phone had that another phone didn't have, you'll be kind of disappointed, because like I said, this was a run-of-the-mill phone from 2011. They were cheap, they were good to go. You didn't have to think too much about them. If you broke them or lost them, you always could get another one. They were not too expensive. These were basically the workhorses of the networks back in the day, and they did their job perfectly well. They were just basic run-of-the-mill phones, and it's great to cover these phones as Not everyone had all the fancy, expensive, weird design phones that I usually cover on this channel. So it's always good to see a phone that everyone had access to, and maybe it'll bring back a lot of nostalgia if you're watching this video and you once owned this phone or still own it somewhere. You may want to go pull it out, take a look at it, and remember back in the day when you did use it, and see if it still charges and stuff. This thing absolutely does not have anything beyond what it does. So yeah, that is basically the end to this video, and as usual, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like on this video. It really helps the channel get on the YouTube algorithm, and this video to get on the algorithm as well. Also hit that subscribe button if you like what you saw and you want to see more content from me. Also check out my social media down in the description below. Thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in my next video.